There's a moment in every journey of faith where the exhaustion catches up with you. The initial fire has cooled, the promises still feel distant, and the world around you is asking a very practical question: is this still worth the cost? For a group of first-century believers, that question became unbearable, and a remarkable letter was written, not to shame them, but to answer them with the most thorough, most carefully reasoned case for holding on. That letter is Hebrews, and it might just be speaking directly to you right now. The people under pressure. Imagine being a Jewish follower of Jesus in the first century. Your entire world, from the moment you could understand language, had been shaped by the Jewish faith, the Torah, the temple, the priesthood, the annual festivals. These weren't just religious practices. They were the lens through which you understood God, yourself, and how the universe worked. Your identity was inseparable from them. And then you encountered Jesus. You believed. You joined a community of people who understood him, not as a rejection of your heritage, but as its fulfillment. For a while, it all made sense. It all felt alive and urgent and true, but then the pressure started building. By the 60s AD, Rome was turning hostile toward Christianity. Not all religions faced the same treatment. Judaism had legal standing in the empire, but Christianity was new, strange, and increasingly seen as a threat. Following Jesus was no longer a private spiritual conviction. It was starting to cost real things. Your job, your social standing, your family relationships, your safety. The letter itself preserves the memory of what these believers had already endured. Public insults, persecution, watching friends imprisoned, having their property confiscated. And yet in those early days, they had endured it with joy. The faith was alive. The conviction was fresh. The hope felt immediate, but that was then. Now, in the time this letter was written, the fire had dimmed. The cost hadn't decreased. If anything, it was climbing. Some of these people were quietly, privately starting to calculate the exit, and there was an exit available to them, not abandoning religion entirely, an exit back to Judaism, back to the temple, back to the priesthood and the sacrificial system, which was legal under Roman law in a way Christianity was not. You could ease back, hold on to the spirit of Jesus without the cost of public identification with him. The logic was seductive. The old way is still there. Maybe I can hold both. The argument that changes everything. The author of Hebrews sits down. We don't know who this person was, but whoever they were one of the most brilliant writers in the entire New Testament, and writes a letter, not a scolding letter, not a shame letter. A letter that builds the most thorough, most careful, most compassionate case for one thing: Jesus is better. Not good, not one option among many. Better. Better than everything that came before. The letter opens with one of the most majestic statements in Scripture. In the past, God has spoken through prophets, through Moses, through Isaiah, through Ezekiel, all of them true, all of them important. But now, in these final days, he has spoken through his Son. And when the Son speaks, it's not one more voice in a long succession. It's the voice the entire succession was building toward. Then the author begins to prove this, layer by layer. Jesus is greater than the angels. In first-century Judaism, angels weren't minor spiritual beings. They were understood to be the intermediaries through whom God gave the law. They carried divine authority, but Jesus, he doesn't bow before them. They bow before him. He sits at the right hand of God's majesty, and the angels worship him. Then, Jesus is greater than Moses. For a Jewish audience, this is striking in a different way. Moses wasn't just a figure, he was the figure, the one who encountered God face to face, the one through whom God gave the Torah, the one who led the people out of Egypt. He was the central pillar of Jewish identity. To say someone is greater than Moses was not a small theological claim, but the author says it directly. Moses was a servant in God's house. Jesus is faithful as a son in God's house, and the builder of a house is always greater than the house itself. Moses pointed to something. Jesus is what Moses was pointing to. The priesthood, the heart of the argument. Then the author moves to the argument that forms the heart of the entire letter. The priesthood. In the Old Covenant, there was a problem built into the structure of the universe itself. God is holy, completely and utterly set apart, a purity that human beings in their broken state cannot simply walk toward. There is a gap, but God, in His grace, built a bridge. He instituted a priesthood, men from the family of Aaron, set apart to serve as intermediaries, to stand between the people and God, to offer sacrifices that covered sin and maintain the relationship. They were the ones permitted to approach where ordinary people could not. And once a year, on the Day of Atonement, something extraordinary happened. The high priest, only the high priest, would enter the innermost chamber of the temple, the Holy of Holies, the room where God's presence dwelt above the Ark of the Covenant. No one else on earth was permitted to enter. He would go in with blood and make atonement for all of Israel. This was the highest moment of the entire religious year, the closest any human being ever got to the full presence of God, and then he would emerge, and the people would know, for another year, the relationship holds, the gap is covered. But here's what the author of Hebrews wants you to see about this system. It never finished. Every single year, the high priest had to go back in. New blood, new sacrifice, new atonement, because, and this is the crucial point, the blood of bulls and goats, however God prescribed, however sacred, could not permanently remove sin. It could cover it, for this year, for next year, and then it would need covering again. It was a system built with a shadow, a picture, a placeholder, and the author states this directly. The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. This is why it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. It was never meant to be the final thing. It was always pointing forward to something that could actually finish the job. Melchizedek, and the eternal priesthood. And then the author introduces someone unexpected. A figure from the ancient text that barely anyone notices. Melchizedek. He appears exactly once in the entire Old Testament. Genesis 14. Abraham is returning from battle, and this mysterious figure, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, comes out to meet him. He brings bread and wine. He blesses Abraham. Abraham gives him 1/10 of everything. And then Melchizedek vanishes from the story completely. No genealogy, no birth record, no death. No father or mother listed. No beginning of days or end of life recorded. He simply appears, blesses, and disappears. And then, centuries later, a psalmist writes a prophecy about the coming king. You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron, not a Levitical priest bound by the system. A priest in the order of Melchizedek, a priesthood with no recorded beginning and no end, eternal, permanent, not requiring endless repetition or succession. The author of Hebrews says this prophecy is about Jesus. Jesus did not offer the blood of animals. He offered himself. Once, not to be repeated, not to be refreshed or updated, once for all, at the culmination of the ages, to deal with sin by the sacrifice of himself. And then the author gives us an image that should stop us in our tracks. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his duties. Again and again, he offers the same sacrifices. Sacrifices that can never take away sins. But when this priest had offered one sacrifice for sins, one, singular, he sat down at the right hand of God. He sat down. Think about what that means. Every Levitical priest who ever lived stood. They stood because the work was never finished. There was always another sacrifice to offer. Another year coming. Another day of atonement approaching. Jesus sat down. You sit down when the work is done, not when you need rest before continuing, not when there's more to do, when it is finished. A priest who sat down, a sacrifice so complete, so final, so permanent, that it required nothing more. The gap closed. Once for all, irreversibly. Part 5, The High Priest Who Understands. The author could have stopped there. The priesthood argument alone is compelling. Jesus is a better priest. His sacrifice is permanent. The work is finished. But the author goes deeper. He goes personal. We do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. The old high priest was human, which meant he had his own weaknesses, which meant that before he could enter the Holy of Holies on behalf of the people, he had to offer a sacrifice for himself. First, he wasn't above the problem. He was part of it, but Jesus is different. He knows what your life feels like from the inside. He experienced hunger, exhaustion, grief, betrayal, being misunderstood by people close to him, being rejected by people he came to help. The weight of an impossible situation with no easy way through. He was tempted in every way, just as we are. Not almost every way, not most ways. Every way. And he did not give in. Which means when you come to him, tired, doubting, weary from holding on, he is not looking at you with contempt. He's not sitting at the throne of grace with impatience, waiting for you to get it together before he'll see you. He is a high priest who has been in the same terrain you're standing in, who knows what the ground feels like under your feet, who knows exactly what you need: mercy, grace, help in your time of need, not after you've improved, not when you've earned an audience, in your time of need, which is now, which is whatever brought you here. The cloud of witnesses. The author has built his case. Now he turns from argument to direct appeal. Jesus is greater than angels, greater than Moses. His priesthood is eternal. His sacrifice is final and complete. His intercession is personal and informed by genuine human experience. The old covenant was a shadow. The real thing has arrived. Now he says, don't throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere. Not perseverance should be easy by now. Not a mature believer wouldn't struggle like this. You need to persevere. Perseverance is a need, meaning this is genuinely hard, meaning holding on requires something. And then the author does something brilliant. He reaches back into history, their history, and begins to list every person who ever lived by faith. Not faith as feeling. Not faith as certainty. Faith as the legal title deed to something you cannot yet see, the evidence of things not yet visible. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets, name after name after name, and as the list builds, the author tells you what some of them endured. They were tortured, refusing to be released so they might gain a better resurrection. They faced jeers and flogging and chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, sawn in two, killed by the sword. They went about in animal skins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They looked like the evidence had failed. They looked like faith hadn't delivered. They looked like they had lost. But the author reframes it. You have it backwards. They weren't too small for the world's standard. The world wasn't large enough to contain them. And then comes the pivot that unlocks everything. These were all commended for their faith. Yet none of them received what had been promised. None of them. They lived by faith. They died in faith. They held the legal claim their entire lives, and the promise had not yet arrived in full when they closed their eyes. And now, through the centuries, their story continues. They're not finished. Abraham is in it. Moses is in it. David is in it. Every person who holds on today is in it. They stayed in the story without seeing the end, and the people reading this letter who were about to give up and walk away were one generation in a line stretching back thousands of years, right before the ending arrives. To let go now, when every person in that entire list endured things far harder, without letting go, that would be to break the line, to step out of a story that has been building for millennia, right before the culmination arrives. The pioneer. Then comes the most iconic image of the entire letter. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders, and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. A great cloud of witnesses. The word witnesses carries weight. These aren't passive spectators. A witness is someone who testifies, someone who gives evidence in court, someone who stands up and says, "I know this to be true, my life proves it." Every name from chapter 11 is a piece of evidence testifying to you across time. Abel's life says, "It's worth it even when it costs you everything." Noah's life says, "Keep building even when everyone is laughing." Abraham's life says, "Go even when you don't know where you're going." All of them, surrounding you, saying the same thing. We held on. So can you. But the author doesn't want you to focus on the witnesses. He wants you to focus on someone else. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Pioneer, the one who goes first into territory nobody else has entered, who blazes the trail, who makes the path possible by walking it before you. Perfecter, the one who takes faith to its full completion, who finishes what faith starts, who brings to its final intended purpose, the thing you're holding on to right now. Jesus didn't just teach about faith. He didn't just model it from a distance. He ran the race in his own person, through Gethsemane, through the cross, through 3 days of darkness, all the way to the resurrection, and then he sat down at the right hand of God's throne. The pioneer has reached the finish line, and he's not sitting there with his eyes closed. He's watching you run. He knows what it costs to run it from the inside. He knows the weight of the long middle. He's been in it, and he's not going anywhere. So here's everything. Hebrews is saying, distilled into one place. The old covenant was real. The prophets were real. Moses was real. The priesthood was real. The sacrifices were real. But all of it was a shadow, a picture, a placeholder built by design to point toward someone who would be the substance behind the shadow. That someone is Jesus. He is the Word the prophets were pointing toward. He is the priest who sat down because his sacrifice requires no repeating. He is the high priest who has gone into the real Holy of Holies, not with animal blood, but with his own. He is the pioneer of a faith held not on feelings or circumstances, but on the legal claim of a promise that cannot be revoked. And if you walk away now, you're not making a sideways move. You're not choosing a neutral alternative. You're trading the real thing for the picture of it. You're stepping out of the sunrise and back into a painting of the sunrise. You have a priest who sat down. You have a sacrifice that is finished. You have a door to the throne of grace that is permanently, irreversibly open. You have a cloud of witnesses, every name from Abel to the last person who held on in faith, all of them testifying, hold on. And you have a pioneer already at the finish line, seated, watching you, knowing the cost of every single step. If you're tired, genuinely, deeply tired, of holding on, this letter was written for you. If what started as alive and real now feels like maintenance and habit, if you're going through the motions without the feeling, if you're quietly asking yourself how much longer you can do this, Hebrews was written for you specifically by someone who saw this coming. Their answer isn't, generate more enthusiasm, feel more, try harder. Their answer is, look at what you actually have. Not at how you feel. Look at what is objectively, permanently, irreversibly true. A finished sacrifice, a seated priest, an open door, a cloud, a pioneer. Hold on. If you've been drifting, not a dramatic exit, just a slow, quiet movement away, a little further each month, until one day you look up and the shore is barely visible. The author has a word for that too. The answer to drift isn't shame. It's an anchor. And if you're watching this from outside faith entirely, unsure about any of this, I want you to know something. The God described in this letter is not who you might think he is. He's not distant. He's not hard to reach. He hasn't set up barriers. He's gone to extraordinary lengths, through a priest, through a sacrifice, through a son, so that the door would stay open, so that anyone who wants to come can come.
Hear now, O
Approach
Israel, the
throne of
commandments and
grace with
statutes,
confidence.
which I speak in
Receive
your hearing
mercy.
this day.
Find grace
Be
to help
steadfast
in
in your
time of
journey.
need. That invitation is open, that door is open, that possibility is real.